Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Chaotic Wholesome Talk Show. I am Kay, your co-host, and we have some amazing guests here today, so we are going to speed through the bookkeepings. So, David, my wonderful co-host, who are you, and what are we doing here, so we can get on to the lovely people to my left?
Hi, I'm David, aka Full Rubber Ducky. Welcome to the Chaotic Wholesome Talk Show, where every week we talk about TTRPGs and how to be a better GM, how to be a better player, how to make cool stuff, how to support people who do cool stuff, all with an eye for intersectionality and inclusion, so that we all can have a good time.
Yes, and David is correct. I forgot to update with this. So, y'all, it's aggressively Monday for a Tuesday. I am Kay. I'm your host. You can find me. I've got a lot going on right now. Thank you for the resubscribes, Ikram. My streaming schedule for September, I just posted it. It's at the top of my Twitter, at KDamnFear. Go see it. There's too much. I'm not gonna talk about it. Let's talk about these awesome people that we have here. And let's start with Gio. Would you be so kind as to tell us who you are and what you do while I update our stream title, because Tuesday.
Sure thing. Hi everyone, I'm Gio. I do a lot of art, mostly for TTRPGs. I also do game dev and do QA professionally. And yeah, worked on a bunch of different stuff. If it has mechs, I may have worked on it.
And we do like our mechs here. Waks, tell us about you.
Yeah, sure. So, yeah, hi, I'm Wax. I'm a game designer. I designed a bunch of games, as game designers are wont to do. I also write. I write novels as well as serials, and I really like Southeast Asian culture. So,
Amazing. So, you all are awesome. You volunteered to be here, and we are so grateful. And y'all are working on some really cool projects. So, who would like to go first and just tell us a little bit about what are you working on? And I mean, you don't even have to tell us why we should be hype about it, because you tell us what they are, and you can't not be hype about what you're working on.
Wax, you go first.
like anything that we're working on right now,
Yeah.
like currently.
Yeah. What are you most passionate about that you're working on? We've
Right.
got some amazing people in this chat. They're already like, we like mechs. So like, if you want to talk, like,
All right.
what you working on? What can we get hype about? What can you educate us about?
For sure, yeah. Well, right now, my current project right now is this little game called Gubat Banwa, which is, think of it like Final Fantasy Tactics, but in Southeast Asia, like mythic Southeast Asia. It's kind of like that, and it's been a huge part of my design, like, thing for like 2 years now. It's been really hard to design for, but it's fulfilling. It's great to design for. But I did get my sort of game design chops started with Maharlika, which is my big sci-fi spirit mechs game that I worked on with Gio. We were both very young in the sort of TTRPG game design space when we thought to work on it, but we both had a passion for robots, and Filipino culture, so we started working it together, and thankfully it got kickstarted with the Our Shores campaign, and um, we have uh, we have a potential. I don't know if I can say it here. Actually, maybe later. I'll say it later.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll just talk about Maharlika a bit.
Yeah. Please.
Yeah, Wax DM'd me one time, and I was just like, "Who's this person? How do they find my work?" And I was like, "Okay, whatever." And they had this really cool pitch for me. It was basically like Filipino culture and mechs, and I'm like, all right, I'm in. It was really funny because about 2 years or 3 years before that, my final for my college project was a Filipino mech like comic slash story thing. So I was just like, oh, sick! I gotta bring this back. Very cool. Uh, and then he started messaging me, and like originally the whole game was in Tagalog, right?
Yeah,
So I
there's
was
a
yeah
game
yeah
that's written in Tagalog.
yeah. So I was reading it. I was like, I'm like I'm a first gen Filipino Canadian, so like I can kind of read a lot of the stuff, but like not super good, not super well. So I'm like reading it. I'm like, I think I get what's going on. I get the feel for this. But then I think Wax working on like a English translation as well. And I was when I started reading the English translation, I was like, oh wait, this makes even more sense. Yeah,
I
so it
had
was
this is
really cool.
barely tangentially related, but I took
Yeah.
I took German as one of my college classes and had a lot of German speakers around me growing up, and I could I didn't really keep it. Like I wanted to, but I just didn't. And then I remember like I watched a lot of documentaries, and I just had a documentary on while I was like cleaning my house, doing something. And I'm like doing something, and I'm like, why am I only understanding like every third word that this person is saying? And I look at the TV, and it was someone being interviewed, and they were speaking German, and it was subtitled. And I'm like, oh, I kept some of it. I kept some of it. But imagine it's kind of that moment of like, okay, I got this. Now it's better.
Yeah.
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 It's great. So I'm really excited that you're here, Gio, because we were discussing this in the green room, which I guess my room is green today with the lights.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, it is.
Yeah.
Before we started, that like I got my start because through working at DeviantArt, I was one of the first
Yeah.
moderators and I keep saying cast members, which is not. I was one of the. We were called core admin at the time at DeviantArt. So I'm like,
yes,
Right.
yeah,
I
yeah.
always get excited when we have an artist because artists are like where I came from, and it's so great.
Oh, that's so great. Yeah.
And David, did you drop that in chat yet? I've been scrambling. Gio's art station is incredible.
Yes.
Your artwork is
Absolutely.
mind-blowing.
Thanks. Thanks. It's still a work in progress, I'd like to say, but a lot of it is chronological, so it kind of shows like my journey into figuring out how to do art. I'm still figuring out how to do art. Even more recently, like I take classes and stuff, and learning about all the cool stuff that's happening. It's fun.
I know so
Yeah.
many self-taught artists who are like, I'm never going to be done. But I also, like, we were just discussing this with, was it Cam, when Cam was on? And someone asked, like, Matt Mercer, like, when do you feel like, when do you know a world is done? When are you done building your TTRPG world? And he's like, he's got the Tal'Dorei Reborn campaign setting sitting in front of him, and he's like, oh, it's not done. There's so much more to do. And Brennan Lee
Yeah.
Mulligan's like, this is one continent. And he's still saying it's not done. It's done, man. This is it. So I feel like storytelling and art, you never feel like you're done. So,
Yeah.
and also I feel like with art, you always have more to learn.
Oh yeah, for sure.
But,
Uh,
oh, keep going. Do you have more?
no, that's it.
So, one of the reasons I was so excited to have you all on is you dropped this little, you're like, we love Filipino culture. And I'm like, that's great. But also, and look, I'm not throwing shade on it because I play in D&D 5e. 5e is like my forgotten realm. But holy cats, I am reaching the point of done with Western European fantasy settings, right? Like it's really cool still, but I could seriously use a different flavor. So you two have amazing, different breath of fresh air settings. Tell us something. Tell us what you do. Why? I mean, I don't want to say why you love it because why you love it should be obvious, right? But like, tell us what you do differently and what excites you and what we as storytellers and lore crafters can learn and where to start. And I'm just throwing a billion questions at you. I'm going to stop talking.
Well, me personally, I didn't really grow up kind of with the usual suspects of fantasy, like with like Lord of the Rings and stuff like that. I watched Lord of the Rings much later when I was a lot older. Um, I mostly grew up on the stories of my grandparents and my parents about the countryside here in the Philippines, and that sort of that's a different kind of of fantasy. Like it's a lot more personal. It's a lot different. It's a lot more different, and it's something that I personally don't see represented much in um, in fantasy these days. It's kind of it's I'm kind of vocal about it on Twitter about how I maybe hate is like too much of a word, but like how much I dislike how there's a perceived default now when you talk about fantasy, that when you say fantasy, it immediately brings up images and concepts in people's minds, and how much I didn't like that, because when I was growing up and I was reading fantasy, it was very different for me. Like the childhood book series I had when I was growing up, usually it's stuff like like Lord of the Rings or Narnia or whatever, but mine it was um, the How to Train Your Dragon books series. That was very what do you call this? It was very Viking, like it's very Norse in its cultures, and that was super cool for me, and that was super great, and that's why uh, I can't just attribute it to just upbringing, because very later on, as I started getting into role playing games and stuff like that, I couldn't actually get much into just standard fantasy. Like I never got into role playing games through Dungeons and Dragons. I got into role playing games because of Vampire the Masquerade, um, and that's because I was really into vampires when I was younger. And
My
you
screen
know,
name is
with all-
Damphir. I feel you.
yeah, exactly, yeah. And I was really into it, and I got into it, and I got into Mage the Awakening and everything that. So that's how I got into RPGs in the first place, and I've really interfaced with a lot of standard fantasy. There's so much what do you call this? There's so much sort of that's not representation, but there's so much fantasy that's circled or centered around the standard that's arisen in the last couple of decades, uh, and me and a bunch of my other artists always sort of bemoan that fact, because we feel like it's it's um it's constrained a lot of imaginations, and personally, it's for me, it's not because people want just that. I mean, it's pretty obvious that people want more than just that, right? um but when we put intersectionality into the whole thing, it's because it started working, uh, and we have this sort of consumerist approach to things. So since standard fantasy sells, right, so people keep making more standard fantasy, and it's kind of hard to break out of it. But yeah, it's something that uh, that I aspire to do, and I get a lot of like-minded artists that way,
Yeah,
which
for
includes
sure.
Gio, right? So
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Uh, I I was raised in Canada, so I had a pretty like Western upbringing, but I was always friends with like a lot of Asians and other fellow Filipinos, and I remember this very vividly, just going to my friend's house and watching like pirated, just fan subbed like Gundam Seed episodes because
yeah,
they weren't showing anywhere, and like I think YTV is the main one here in Canada. It was like our Cartoon Network sort of thing, and I don't remember them showing that. Or maybe it just ended. Maybe Gundam Wing just ended around that time when I was growing up, and so there was like not really any other Gundam show. So my friend's sister, older sister, would just like get these fan subbed Gundam Seed episodes, and I remember just like watching and be like, "What's that? That's a giant robot. That's pretty cool. I like that." uh, I think around that time Zoids was also on too, so I was just like mechanical animals, and also like Power Rangers I think was also doing like a little rerun, so I was like, more mechanical animal things. Oh, that turned into robots. Oh, that's so sick. Uh, so I was like always super into that, and I remember them like always being like, "Oh yeah, this is Japanese," and I'm like, "This is Japanese, but why is it showing in Canada? Why don't we see other other stuff?" But I was just like in the back of my mind, I was like, "Okay, I guess all the cool stuff comes from Japan. I guess that's neat." And when I kept growing up, I'm like, yeah, I guess I always try to like find out what other stuff is happening around the world. And like that kind of made me go back to like looking at what Filipino artists were doing. And after I think like high school, maybe even college, I was just like always like, well, what are the other Filipino artists doing? Are they doing something really cool? And yeah, really funny enough, I'm like now friends with like a lot of those Filipino artists I started following after high school because working on projects with Wax and other stuff. It's pretty wild. Yeah.
It like I have two immediate thoughts, which is like one, and maybe we should talk about this, but it was so long ago. Like the early days of trying to access anime,
Yeah.
right? And the like going somewhere and having to like buy a VHS of like fan subbed, re-recorded. And in fact, at some point, I found an old. It was a CD. Like it was recent enough that it was on like a DVD. And I dropped this DVD into a computer to be like, oh my gosh, I remember this. This was so cool. And when it came up on my screen, it was like this big.
Yeah, it's a 4x3.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, I forgot all about all of this. We are so spoiled. But
Yeah.
that is one of the coolest things about like the internet and these various creator communities, be it the TTRPG community, be it artist communities. Like the internet has made so many people be able to come together and find each other and forge these friendships and relationships and lead to projects that people just wouldn't have been able to take part in before.
Yeah.
Exactly. Over here in the Philippines, the main way we got anime was like the two major channels would have runs of Tagalog dubbed anime. It was
Yeah.
usually like the popular ones were usually
Mm-hmm.
Dragon Ball, Ghost Hunter.
Yeah.
What was that in Japanese? Yu Yu
Uh,
Hakusho, I think.
yeah, Yu Yu
Right?
Hakusho is the one. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's what
Yu
it's
Yu
called. Yeah.
Hakusho. And well,
Oh,
Samurai X, right? Rurouni Kenshin.
for
Like,
Yu Yu
Yeah.
Hakusho, didn't they change his name for the Filipino release?
yeah. What was his name in the original?
Um, hold on, I'm looking it up right now. Please continue while I look this up.
Yeah, because if I remember correctly, the name over here in the Philippines is like Eugene or something. I
Yes,
forgot.
Eugene.
Yeah.
That does sound like a really Filipino name for some reason, though. I know a lot. I know a lot.
Yeah, exactly. It's Eugene over here. I don't know what it is in the original. But yeah, Ghost Fighter is like super popular here in the Philippines. Also, yeah, Rurouni Kenshin. Like you have random people over here going, kind of knowing who Batosai is for some reason. Like that's so funny. Like they, like Batosai, as long as they have like a stick, they call themselves Batosai. It's very funny. And that's how like since our cartoons were mostly actually just anime because a lot of like the animation work was outsourced here, right, in the Philippines. So
Still is.
Yep.
right, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So since a lot of our cartoons were just anime, it's a lot of like the culture here is very anime, like in general, like pop culture, which is super interesting to think about when comparing it to how um, like Canada or America did it, right?
Right.
So that's interesting. I guess one of
So-
the most. Yeah. keep
Continue.
Oh.
Because I just got another question for
I
you.
will say very, very
I just
quickly.
wanted-
Wax, I'm so sorry. I've never had this problem with this captioning software. It really hates your captions. So I sent you a link again because it just keeps dropping your captions. I'm so sorry.
Oh yeah.
Continue.
No worries. No worries. Let me fix that.
The nice thing is this: we download the video. The VOD goes on YouTube, and YouTube auto captions everything. So there will actually be full captions for anyone watching in the VOD. If you're watching and you need captions, I'm so sorry. Technology
Is it working now?
not liking me today. Yes, I believe. Yes, it's working now. Go right on ahead.
All right. I did just want to say that connected to the whole anime being part of the culture here is that a lot of the people grew up on Voltes 5. It's super popular here in the Philippines. Like everyone knows who Voltes 5 is. Everyone knows the theme song, right? It's very fun. It's also kind of a symbol of like revolution here against the dictator before, because it got banned because it had like revolutionary themes, and the dictator didn't want anyone getting any ideas, so um it got it got banned. It was very funny, and actually a lot of Maharlika's uh setting design or lore design or feel and vibe was based on that sort of tidbit, because I was like, I looked at it, and then the way we look at mechs, like we like them because they're giant robots, but most of the time they're also metaphors for something else, right? So
Mhm.
in Harlika, the mechs kind of represent this sort of cooperative rebellion against an established system, which is kind of obvious when you read more of the setting, because my writing is kind of heavy-handed like that. But yeah.
Nick.
That actually leads to the question that I had, which is, you've done a ton of writing, you've done novels, you're now working what looks like your fourth game system. What, besides just the departure from sort of standard Western fantasy, what have been your influences in how you design your game worlds and your philosophy of game design and the elements that you choose to incorporate into your game design?
Wow. That's a good question, but
We're
I've
throwing you
spent
the
a lot of time
softball
thinking
question.
about that.
Yeah.
Right.
Easy.
Yeah. That's I've had a lot of time to think about that anyway. And I think a lot of my design is, I'd say it's influenced by RPGs, obviously, by other RPGs particularly. But very recently, I think I've realized a lot of it is inspired by fiction outside of RPGs, because a lot of the time when we're role playing, we make up like a fiction in our heads, right? And if the game can't deliver or help facilitate that fiction in your head, then I think that it's not a really good game, personally, right? So if you want a game that does like high flying anime action, right? Like like a Madoka Magica game or something, then you want something that when the chips are down, when you roll the dice, that's what happens in the fiction. That's what you see in your mind's eye, right? That's the collaborative storytelling you're doing. Um, so a lot of my influences have been that, as well as a lot of uh, it's kind of weird, but like hermeneutic stuff, right? Like like one of my major fields is philosophy, so I do a lot of reading and a lot of application when it comes to humanities. And the thing you learn about RPGs is that it's very social, and if you have a lot of like social uh, sort of knowledge or social engineering skills and stuff like that, then really kind of very direct to how you can design games, because a lot of rule books is to facilitate player behavior, right? So a lot of the time, a lot of my work is influenced by pieces that work on how to interpret things, right? So when I write something down, I want them to be able to interpret it in these kinds of ways, and that doesn't go for just setting, but also for mechanics, as people say. Um, when someone reads this sort of mechanic, I go for, um, okay, it's clear, but at the same time, it has a direct fictional analog, right? Like, you're not just rolling because you have to roll it. You're doing this mechanic because your character is doing this thing in the fiction, and you know um, the fate of the game hangs in the balance and stuff like that. So a lot of that design has gone into it for sure. Um, like when I think about mechs, I think about very tactile modular systems and stuff like that. So I like modular sort of build designs and character customization when it comes to mechas. And that's why I made Maharlika in the first place, because I really liked that kind of tactile feeling. Um, and I watched Escaflowne like too many times, so that's why I really
Oh man,
I made Maharlika.
buried they buried mechs in this high school romance. It is
Right,
that's a whole. I'm so angry at the show for a lot of reasons, but
right.
it's like, listen, you have the coolest mechs in the world. Why are we No, but no. When I was looking into Maharlika, one of the things that was really cool is in your intro video. It's like the whole point of this is so you could do cool things. Do you want to go
Mhm.
fast? Do you want to go faster? Do you want to go really fast? Here's how you do it in the game. And I think about all the theory crafters, especially in Dungeons and Dragons. Like, there are all these people who are like, what are the cool things you can do with a bag of holding? What are the properties? Um, and there are tons of TikToks about, here's what you do. You take a thing and you throw it up in the air really high, and then you polymorph it into a cow, and then it becomes a ballistic cow, and all these things. And on the one hand, it's really cool to sort of like examine all the rules of D&D and really get into that. But on the other hand, you shouldn't have to work so hard to do cool things in um, an RPG system. And Maharlika really seems like you like mechs. There's a particular thing you want to do with mechs, and you find it cool. Well, here's how you do it in this system, and here's why it's important that you do it in this system, and here's why it's important that you work together to do a fastball special or some sort of like cool combat move. Um,
Yeah.
and I think that's also, if you haven't seen the intro video, please go check it out. It's hilarious.
Yeah,
Um,
Dragon Kid does good work. I love
Yeah,
the
That
Dragon Kid's
videos.
great.
Yeah. That
Yeah.
is actually one of my complaints about like 5e. And like I've got complaints about 5e is pretty versatile. I can take 5e and make it do most of what I want it to do most of the time. Not all the time. I can't run a Thirsty Sword lesbian style game in 5e.
no,
Can't do it. However, I would like 5e so much more if it made cooperation cooler. If it rewarded you more, because like yes, your cleric is going to cast bless, and that's cool. But a fastball special is all a GM bending the rules, and like there should be like you all plan this thing, you all coming together. Like what do you? But no, it's you. This is what you're doing in your 6 seconds, and this is what you're doing in your 6 seconds. So I love systems that are like work together, and the system itself is going to reward you. That's awesome.
and it's infuriating because it happened in Lord of the Rings. Like, Gimli was like,
Right. Yeah.
toss me. And he's like, are you sure? He's like, just do. And so he picks him and throws him, and then he throws him at orcs, and then they die. And it's like,
Yeah.
dear D&D, you're based off of Lord of the Rings. Why can't I do this cool Lord of the Rings moment in your system?
Exactly.
But so looking at like your promotional material and whatnot, you do a lot of work with artists, and this is something that baffles me in particular because I have zero artistic talent at all. but I do a lot of writing. So when you have these detailed ideas and really complex concepts that you have for the systems that you're building, how do you convey that to artists? And how do you end up working with artists to communicate that?
Um, working with artists is actually
That's kind of a whole
it's
talk as to
actually
itself.
Yeah,
yeah, exactly.
but I
Um,
only easy
well, think
questions for me.
thankfully for when I was working with Gio, I guess that's one thing to keep in mind when you're the writer and you're getting people to make art for you is that you kind of have to have, well, you don't have to have it, but it's a huge bonus and a huge load off your chest if you have like the same sort of aesthetic sense as the artist that you're working with, as well as they see the vision that you have. You can only explain something so much, until like the artist actually gets it. But there's some artists that are like on the same page as you immediately, and you don't have to explain much. Like with Gio, actually, I didn't explain too much when it came to the designs of the things. I wrote the lore for the for the frames, and then Gio was like, "Yeah, I got this," and then he
Yeah.
did everything. And it was great. And he got immediate. I think it's because we were working off of very like similar inspirations. Like I kept talking about how I love Titanfall with
Ooh.
with what do you call that, with Geo. I love the scale of Titanfall, but like how it wasn't like two huge robots, but they're like still big robots, and it makes for these like very kinetic and fast um, mech combat. And I wanted to do something like that with Maharlika, and thankfully Geo likes Titanfall too. It was great.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah.
Right? So at least on my end, that's how I work with artists. But I do go like a lot of extra miles when commissioning artists nowadays, especially when it's for Gubat Banwa, because unlike with Gio, Gio got me, so I didn't have to do a lot of writing stuff for Gio. But for Gubat Banwa artists, there's a lot of lost culture and a lost aesthetic sense when it comes to pre-colonial Philippines and Southeast Asia in general. So I'm the one who did all the research, and the artists don't know a lot about that. So I have to do the job of sort of synthesizing the research and then giving it to them in a form that they can digest and that they can use for their art. And
Yeah.
a lot of my writing right now is writing up commission documents for them to be able to read and for them to be able to manifest what I'm trying to get to them. And thankfully, it's been working. I think so. How about
Dylan is doing a lot of work on those art
yeah,
reference documents.
Uh-huh.
If you're
yeah,
ever in the Gubat
exactly.
Banwa Discord, Dill's the art director for Gubat
Art-
Banwa, has this whole like list of like what each faction has, what their materials are, and stuff
Oh,
like
I
that.
love
Like,
those
oh, they're so
docs.
great. I've done some fan art for Gubat Banwa before, and every time I look at it, I'm like, I know exactly how this is gonna work. I've made like some like golem things before because one of my characters was like this sort of like a warforged golem, I guess is the direct D&D sort of equivalent.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just like, oh, how does it look like in the Filipino slash Southeast Asia aesthetic? And he had a document that was like specifically for that, and I was like, oh, sick, got it. So
yeah,
did you?
exactly.
Yeah,
Let me
Dylan and Waks do good work there.
let
Yeah,
me
sorry, go ahead.
no, let me turn that on you, Gio. Like as an
Yeah,
artist, right? Like what is
yeah.
kind of the like because I just worked with an artist who's amazing. If you all don't know Cozy Spoon, we stand Cozy
Mhm.
Spoon so much here. And
Absolutely.
we had like opposite ends of the spectrum. We had someone who came in with a Pinterest board, right? A written description, a Pinterest board, like exactly what they wanted. And then we had someone else come in and be like looks like this, horns like this, hair kind of shaggy. that was their entire. And Cozy's amazing and did amazing art off of both because like A, flexible, B, like the more detailed
for
person
sure.
had exactly
Yeah.
what they wanted. So like what's the best and worst scenarios for you as an artist or for someone who's looking to commission artists? Like as an artist, what's like
Yeah.
give me this, don't give me this.
Oh, the Pinterest boards is really cool, but even better if you tell us exactly what specifically is in that image that you're like, I like specifically this. Like, for example, you have a picture of a bird and be like, I like this bird. Better would be like, I like the wings. I like the feathers of this bird. It's very cool. Please put it on XYZ thing. That helps so much. But surprisingly for Maharlika, I didn't do it. There was not a lot of that because I was just like, can I make this mech kind of look like this because it feels sort of like this other similar mech, and we kind of like mash it around. I remember we had Kickstarter backers who commissioned frames for mechs too. Thank you for those backers who for commissioning cool mecha designs. There's a lot of really
Yes.
cool ones. Uh, there were a lot of really fun ones. A lot of them were very non-specific, which was kind of hard. But I was like, oh, you want it to feel sort of like this? Maybe we can kind of bring it around to be something similar to this thing. Some of them were very specific. They were like, I want it to. There was one that was like, I want it to specifically look like War Greymon, and I'm like,
Yeah.
say no more.
I was
I got
thinking
that.
that too.
Yeah, that was probably the easiest one to do.
It was,
But
actually that was also the easiest one to write for because I'm
oh,
also like, I
digital
love
times.
Wargreymon, so
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I think I have it on my ArtStation if people want to know what it looks like. I will put it on.
We will drop the link.
This-
Yes. Oh my goodness,
this
it's
one.
so cool. Okay, here.
Yeah.
Here, everyone.
The dragon one.
Oh, so cool. So
Oh,
We're-
that's awesome.
right, we are discussing mechs, and you know, I'm a fangirl for all sorts of stuff. Like I nerd out over, you know, people doing cool stuff. And every so often, I'm already fangirl, I'm already excited, cool people are coming on there and talk about a thing, and then they drop a thing that makes it even cooler. And I need to hear how all of this mech stuff has roots in Filipino folklore. Please.
Absolutely.
I've been so excited for this.
Right. So well, it mostly stemmed from me. Because there was this. I don't know if I have a picture of it, but there's this artist in the Philippines. His name is Jap Mikel. He's a great artist. And he
Very
once
cool.
right he once made this. He makes like random art on Instagram and shit like that. And then he once made this in the Philippines, there's this wood called mangkono, and in English it's Philippine ironwood. It's one of the hardest woods in the world, if I remember correctly. Like a diamond-tipped saw would take days to cut through it, and that's how hard the ironwood is. And Jap looked at it and was like, he made this sort of concept about how the mangkono, the ironwood, could be used as mech frames, right? So he made this sort of like tree mech, and then the guy was sitting at like the heart of the tree mech, and it was made out of ironwood, Philippine ironwood. And I was like, yo, that's so cool, and I love. At that point, I was like really into my robots phase, so I started. And then I played Lancer, and I was like, yeah, I want to do something like this. So I started writing it. Started writing it down, and before even any of the mechanics came, every single one of the frames that I started writing, every single one of the frames that you could edit, that you could put modules on and stuff like that, they're each based off of a particular Philippine story, right, or Philippine epic. And I made that a particular point because a lot of the um, a lot of the mechs have so much culture in them. And I once made a Twitter thread about how um, there's this thing in the Philippines where it's the people say it takes a village, and that's usually used for people that um, usually for people in the provinces where they need to work together to get one of the younger people off to college or to abroad and stuff like that, because those things are very expensive for us here, right? So like the entire community basically kind of chips in to help get that person's dream a reality. And um I sort of thought about how making a mech is kind of the same. Like everyone has to chip in, everyone has to work, everyone has an engineer, like the software guy, everything. They all work together to make this dream. The mech in this sense, the mech in the Maharlikan sense, is a metaphor for not just revolution, but also for dreams and also for heroism. They're the mechs are made together in the sort of image that community sees as the peak potential of their community. It's their folk hero, it's their epic heroes, right? And that's what the mechs mean in the Gubat Banwa sense, and that's how it kind of pulls on the folklore as well. Not to mention, there's a lot of stories about giants here in the Philippines and how a lot of the giants made the world in a lot of our creation stories. And so I've always been fascinated with giants, and a lot of them are weird here in the Philippines. A lot of them are like one eye and stuff like that. And I was thinking, what if that giant was a Zaku, right? So it's just very fun. Um, so yeah, that's how it kind of ties into to the folklore aspect of the many Philippine cultures here, and uh, it's led to this very unique aesthetic. That's for sure. Like Gio and I were going for like a magic technical sort of aesthetic, and I think we went a step beyond that. So I was always I'm always grateful for Gio for that, because Gio had like the same ideas as I did. So it was great.
There is no feeling in the world like when you find an artist who just jives with what you've got going on. And it could be an artist, it can be like with David and I started throwing out ideas, and David's like, I got this and I'm gonna take it to the next level. Like, it's so exciting when you
Right,
find
yeah.
that creative partner to help you get where you are. And that's so cool.
Yes,
Exactly.
for sure.
So I wanted to give us a slight sidetrack, and I know we can't go too deep on any of this because of reasons, but we have some very cool folks hanging out in chat, and one of our esteemed guests is one of the contributors and working on Into the Motherlands, which is
Oh yes.
I'm a backer. I can't wait for it to come out. We would love to hear more about your work.
Oh, so I recently applied to help them out, and they were like, "We need mechs," and I'm like, "Did someone say mechs?" Uh, there's a couple few TTRPG discords that I'm in, and they're really helpful in helping other artists find jobs. I'm always thankful for that. The specific one I think pinged me was Utopia. They're very good folks over there. They were like, "Oh yes, you, the mecha guy, you should look into this." And yeah, I applied. They were like, "Oh yeah, this fits, sure." And so I'm able to work with them on their very cool Into the Motherlands project. I honestly didn't hear, I haven't like heard about this before I worked on it, but I was like, "Oh, this is cool. All right, I'm into it." And then I read a bit into it, and I was like, "Oh, they gave me their prompts, and they're really cool art director, PT. If you're listening to this, you're very cool. Thank you for letting me on. They helped me with their cool robotical things that are happening, doing some props and equipment. Uh, it's quite an interesting setting, and everyone there, all the artists on there is working really hard. They have some really cool art there. Every time people submit, everyone's just like, yes, yes, keep going, it's great. Everyone's very supportive and helpful, and feedback comes around. Everyone's really nice about that too, so it's really great.
I I
Yeah.
have been excited for Into the Motherlands for quite a while. Right, I watched
Yeah.
the stream back when they were like playtesting it before the Kickstarter. But hearing
Okay.
that it's like that cheer, everyone keep going, this is awesome. Like
Yeah.
that brings me so much joy and makes me so much more excited for this. Like I was already excited. I love those environments.
Yeah. Definitely a great place to work on. If they ever ask for more artists, I definitely would encourage other artists to apply. They're very nice people. Uh they pay really well. They pay on time. That's mostly what you'd want to see in a in a Kickstarter, especially. I know heard of people who are like, oh, they haven't paid me like on time. They haven't paid me in a while. That's the worst. That's always like a little bit of a red flag. Even if there are cool people, just like having payments not happening on time, always you won't find that with Wax either. He'll pay you very well. All the Filipino artists, please. This guy, very good. So that was one thing I really appreciated too. They treat all the artists really great over there.
That's awesome. And
Yeah.
love like a lot of people, there's a lot of mysticism around like how do you create a TTRPG, right? How do you create a system? How does this even come to be? And then because there's this weird like perceived veil of like only certain people can do it, or oh you can only do it if you have like, most people go like, yeah, I homebrew my game, but I couldn't make that a thing. Because there's that weird like self-proclaimed barrier, people don't talk about those things, about like how do people get paid, what's their rate, like what's their value, when do they get paid on time, like that's especially not spoken about. So I love the transparency, and I love the transparency that's a good thing about a thing I like, but also I like transparency about things I like that are not good, because then at least I know.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. There's been a lot of projects. I mean, you hear it every other month or something. Some Kickstarter opens up. Artists are like, wait a second, this was not great. This was not a great experience. Other writers will be like, they're paying like what, like 10 cents, like 5 cents a word or something. You hear about those things, so it's always. I'm glad people talk about it, because it red flags the publisher, developer, and all those people, and be like, please don't work for this.
Well, and
Your time should be spent doing something that's more worth for you. You know.
and also where I at some point I don't have the knowledge yet to do it. I've got a decent collection of knowledge. We need to find a really knowledgeable guest and bring on like how to kickstart your thing, because like I was just talking to an incredible person who's like, I wanna do a Kickstarter for this campaign, and then maybe if we get like a ridiculously high number, we'll make it a printed thing. And I'm like, that's not. You've got to plan from print from the start, and a lot of people just don't. Like David was saying to me when we were talking early on about some of our projects, the Kickstarter is like, you put that together when you're like 80% done. You don't start with the Kickstarter. But that's a whole other rant.
It's a whole
Yeah,
other
that's a
conversation.
whole other.
Other thing. But yes, pay your artists, pay your writers. Creativity is, I hate calling it a soft skill, because you can look at something and be like, oh no, that person knows how to draw mechs. You can look at Gio's mechs, and you can look at my mechs, and you know, so it's not even a soft skill, but it's still treated like a soft skill. So David, you looked like you had a question earlier.
I'm sure I did, and I just had.
I derailed us, like usual.
And now my brain's doing the.
Yeah, it's a pinwheel moment. What if we skipped over? Anything else you two are excited to talk about? Let's see.
I am checking my notes.
I'm
Also,
sure
can
Gio
we
has
just?
some art stuff that they want to talk about.
Gio has a subsection on his art station. Please go check out Gio's art station. I linked it in chat earlier. That's just the Maharlika stuff, and literally all of it is cool. And
Thanks.
just and like especially stuff like weapon design, like things that make sense that you haven't seen in other places. Oh, that was my question. For both of you, like, there are, if you like mechs and you get into mechs, there are sort of like standard things that you are inspired by, like Gundam and whatnot. But do you have any sort of non-standard, less talked about inspirations that you want to mention and bring to our attention? Like, when you brought up Titanfall 2, I was looking at the art and I was just like, I wonder if he plays Titanfall. But yeah, so yeah, what sort of non run of the mill inspirations do you both have?
You should start, Gio.
Okay.
Yeah.
One big thing for me is furniture. Furniture is pretty cool. I really like, especially modern furniture. I always, every time I go to IKEA, I'm just like, how does this thing connect again? And then you just look at it. One big thing that always kind of surprised me, the meme lamp, the one that looks like that creature from Stranger Things, the Demigorgon lamp. I forget what it's called, but it's always fun seeing the mechanics of simple everyday things and seeing how those things sort of interact with each other and being like, we can turn this into a mecha. Yeah, 100%. That could be a mecha's gimmick. And a lot of those things are, I love transforming things specifically. So things like that IKEA lamp that's like, oh yes, it's a ball, and then it opens up and it's like, it's this weird opened up chandelier sort of thing. I'm always like fascinated about those mechanics. Those are always super fun. Another big thing is, I always like a lot of the mechs in Maharlika are based on some sort of mythological like reference or some sort of reference to like, or I put like a reference to like a practice done in pre-colonial Philippines. I think one of the characters is like one of the mecha frames is like a time manipulator sort of thing. And instead of you know how like Time Wizard is basically a clock, right? Time Wizard from Yu-Gi-Oh! That card is basically a clock. I was like, what if Time Wizard but pre-colonial Filipino? So I did some research on like how do pre-colonial Filipinos tell time and that sort of thing. I had this idea. I was like, oh yeah, they count with moon cycles like a lot of other
I
cultures
remember
from
you asking me
before.
that too.
Yeah. Yeah, and and I was like, okay, cool. I'll put this like giant circle around the back of the mech, and like have all these moon phases around there, and have like a circular aesthetic for a lot of different things, and as well, there's also, man, I forget. I feel really bad on mixing up the different cultures together, but there was another one that did time specifically days and months through like knots. Wax, do you know which one?
Days
Which
and nights
culture?
through what?
Through like knots. Like they would have a knot, and then that would be a certain.
That's somewhere. That's a culture in the Cordilleras. I
Yeah.
think it's the Ifugao, but that's
Yeah.
not specific.
It might.
So
Yeah, it might be one of those, but I also sort of put that on the mech as well. There's a lot of references to that. Yeah. So I really liked designing mechs off their theme and doing that. Wax's writing for that really helped for finding the different mechanics I could sort of show off with that sort of thing.
Chat is just like blowing up. Rex Verde says the art looks fantastic. I just bought the game. I love this design approach. It's brilliant. River Fatal just said it's amazing finding mech designs in furniture. And like now that you've said it, I'm like, of course that makes sense. Especially like assembly your stuff furniture and like how does this put together? And you pull it out, and you're like, this is a puzzle. And of course that's how a mech fits together. Of course that's obvious now that you've said it, but it's not at all obvious.
Yeah, I've had design teachers that are like, just look at chairs and other fun stuff, and then I was like, oh, you're right. I think Wax is gonna mention something. Seems like he's ready to.
I wanted to insert that that frame that you were talking about. In the game, it's called the Comsa Relojero. Relojero is just like timekeeper in Tagalogized Spanish. Uh, they're the frame that has a module that gives you the meteor gun, and it's the one that Dragon Kid talked a lot about in his video, and he loved talking about it on the Lancer Discord too, because it's the gun that when you fire it, it doesn't fire off like a bullet. It performs spiritual calculation and then warps space time so that it teleports a meteor directly in front of the guy. So that's always that's always a fun thing to like. It's just like a common gun too. Like you fire it, does things, and suddenly there's a meteor in front of your target. It's always fun.
I was so excited for and praised Wizards of the Coast when they gave me the Drake Warden Ranger, and I was like, I can just drop a dragon onto the battlefield, and that's awesome. No, that's nothing! You summon a freaking meteor! You go full Sephiroth! That's incredible!
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you just go Heartless Angel, exactly.
Yeah,
But
you had me at meteor gun, but it got even cooler.
yeah, exactly.
It also
that's
transforms into the site.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it also transforms.
Oh
into the
yeah,
site.
you're right. Yeah.
Yeah.
The meteor gun turns into a scythe too for some
Yeah.
reason because Gio thought that wasn't cool enough.
Yeah.
Made it
Right.
even cooler.
If a mecha crow lands on it, then you've just hit every little niche in my Edge Monarch heart.
Yes.
Yeah,
absolutely.
exactly. That entire Comsa is actually all about like edginess after all, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So, like Gio hit the nail on the head there. Like Comsa are like the internet edge lords. It's always fun. But yeah, speaking of, so when it comes to inspirations, I actually did dig about other mech stuff that I wasn't able to consume when I was younger. So some of the things that went into the design of Maharlika actually is there's this anime called Gasaraki.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and I really liked it. Like it's slow, and they talk about rice a lot. But like the parts where they get into like that mech with the ritual and stuff, like that's peak Maharlika for me. So that's a huge inspiration. Um, I also really liked I think it was 5 Star Stories. Super cool designs over there, and like a mix of like this weird, even almost like Final Fantasy like designs for their mechs, and it was really great. And then there's this video game that I really like that also inspired a lot of Marlika's like both setting and mechanics actually. Um, Zone of the Enders 2 is one of my favorites for like mecha games. And Marlika actually has like a corruption mechanic, and I kind of is inspired because of Zone of the Enders because I loved how you kind of were like one with your robot there. It was very fun. In contrary to popular belief, because there's a what do you call this? There's a mech, right, that Gio did that looks a lot like the Eva one, right?
Yeah. Eva 02. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Eva 02 there.
Yeah.
And a lot of people thought that it's kind of like Evangelion, but the thing is I've never watched Evangelion actually. Like that's the one I haven't watched, and it's always fun to think because when people read the rules they're like, oh, this reminds me of Evangelion because there's like a corruption mechanic for being in the robot for too long and stuff like that.
David's about to
but-
blow a gasket.
But I haven't watched Evangelion yet, so it's always interesting to see those intersections,
David always teases me because there's been a couple times where I've been like, hey, here's an idea for this game. Here's the thing that should happen. He's like, oh, that's from this movie. I'm like, what movie? And he's like, you haven't seen it. Or like, he was telling someone about this thing and someone went, oh, that's a cool Control reference. And David's like, she's never played Control.
Yeah.
But no. Get your Evangelion pulsing
So-
vein out.
Yeah.
So Evangelion is not an anime I'm going to recommend to most people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It
Yeah, I agree.
is
Yeah.
very out there. It's excellent. It's top notch. It's well done, but it is a journey that most people don't need to have. It is very very screwed up. So if you haven't seen it and you're not interested in seeing it, there's tons of other anime you can watch. There's tons of other mech anime you can watch. Full Metal Panic is right there. Go for it. Um, but if you do watch it for your first time, hit me on Discord so we can talk about it because there's a lot of processing that has to go
Yeah.
with Evangelion. But yeah, no, I was looking at one of the Gio, one of your, and it's the frame Beast of Paradise.
Yes. Yeah. That's the Gawigawen. Yeah.
And it's funny because I was like, okay, it's red, but also it didn't scream 02 to me. Like I didn't immediately go, okay, this is just like a knockoff of, because there's a lot more so for one, the design is completely different. Like it's almost like the mech is wearing like like tribal armor.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like
That's the whole thing.
There's very like I
Drop
put
this link so I can throw it to chat.
Right.
Oh. It's in. I think I have
I
an
had it.
station.
I know
for it.
David has it open, so there we go.
Okay. Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
And yeah, the idea of like using weapons that are based off of traditional weapons.
Yeah. That was a big thing I wanted to keep.
And so it's just like this really cool idea of this modernization of a classic and like pre-classic warfare and bringing it into whatever century mechs are going to be in.
Yeah.
And so yeah, so like 02 is red and this one's red.
Yeah.
But really that's the only like crossover there.
I mean, there's quite a bit of crossover just because the mechs in Evangelion, I guess the Evas in Evangelion, I remember hearing that they're based on like Oni, like Japanese Oni, which are like ogres basically. And surprisingly, the Gawigawen is also like basically a Filipino ogre giant sort of thing. So I was like, oh yeah. So I was like, oh yeah, this makes sense. This is why they kind of look together, because they're both demon ogre sort of inspired sort of things. Yeah. They also have one other thing that I was like, oh yeah, this is an Ava reference, but also this is lore accurate. The cockpit in the Gawigawen is also in the back, in the neck, sort of like, you know how the Avas have the little entry plug sort of thing. They also have it there, but it's also lore accurate because that's where their brains are in the Filipino lore.
It's a lump. Because Gawigawen in the actual lore has like 10 heads. So, and they only have one brain and one lump there. Yeah. They have a lot of hands.
I think it was like 10 heads or like 6 heads or something. It has multiple heads, and I tried to make something similar to that, but it didn't read as well, and I was just like, okay, I can't do that. But what I did was I added like a bunch of different animal heads. So there's like I think about 6 different animals on this Gawigawen based on the like the fauna of the Philippines that are found there. Like you can probably see it there, but there's like the bullhead, which is like a carabao. That's there. There's this goat that's on like the sort of crotch thing that has that on its armor. You won't see it in the back, but there is a boar head on the butt flap. I think there is a turnaround, like a turntable one that you can see that those sort of things.
You'll be
see if I can find it.
To hear that if you just Google Gawigawen and then click on the images tab, Gio, a bunch of your art shows up.
Oh, that's nice. but yeah, there's a bunch of different animal heads that I sort of put in. I think there's like the back skirting is also like fish. These what are they called? These long fishes. I forget what they're called. But they're there on the back as well. So yeah, I
Gio,
tried to find more.
Can you drop that link in the
Yes.
Discord, because
Yes, I did.
moderation, we
Oh.
have a lot of minorities on here, so
Oh,
we don't let people post links because
That makes sense. All right.
trying to make safe
but-
spaces, which also makes things
Yeah.
difficult. Thank you so much. I
Yeah.
will drop this for the chat right now.
Also, this I kind of sort of really want the metal build of this guy.
Yes. I love my teacher got me into doing rendering in this way and presenting my art in this way. So thank you, Audrey. Very cool. Thank you very much for teaching me how to make stuff look like Gundam. He's very cool.
Okay.
Metal builds, crazy.
Yeah.
So I have to ask, because we had an early bonding moment about vampires. Where's your vampire mech?
was
Yes,
it?
actually, yeah, we do. Yeah,
I
we
know,
have
it's
one.
gotta be
Yeah,
there. I
okay,
know it's there.
I
know my
people. Surprisingly, that was not part of the original ones. There's a Manananggal mecha that's
Yeah,
like
I
the
was on that.
Filipino vampire. I will post it here. So
It's the
it's
self-bisecting vampire thing.
Yeah.
that-
Oh, yes,
the-
yes, yes.
yeah.
Here
Yeah.
you go,
It's-
chat.
yeah, you can talk about it, please.
Yeah, in the game, it's since in Filipino folklore, they would remove their lower halves, right, and then stalk the knight with just their upper halves, and then drink blood and stuff like that. In the game, they have two modes. Like they have like a mode where they have feet, and then a mode where they just what do you call that? They turn into jet planes, right? And then they go like zoomy, and that's how they like bisect, right? What's that mech show
Macross?
that they turn into jet planes?
Yes.
Yeah, there.
Yeah,
I was
Macross.
thinking of
Cross.
Macross too.
Yeah.
Yeah, when I was designing it, and I like how Gio's design of it. It kind of has that like sports car feel because it's so fast, right? Like if you look at the design, so that's super cool. That's definitely super cool.
I am a nerd
But-
for
but, yeah.
vampires, and I'm a nerd for
Yeah.
wings. And these are gorgeous wings on a vampire mech. I'm just so happy.
There's also a fun little tidbit about one of the weapons. There's a lore as well of Filipino vampires. You can kill them with like stingrays with a stingray tail, and so it's like sword is using like a stingray shaped kind of blade. It's also I put that in there as
Yeah.
well. Yeah, and it
That's-
transforms. It transforms as well. You put it into the gun and it turns into like the rifle. Just
Yeah.
yeah.
This is
And-
joy.
Yeah, exactly.
This
Yeah.
is joy crystallized.
There's even a weapon over there. If you get the PDF itself and you look at like the modules that you can get, the systems that you can get, one of the weapons that the Manananggal has is entrails, and it's shaped like
Yeah.
the entrails dangling from. It's literally just entrails, and then you use it like a whip, basically.
I love that.
So it's always fun. Mhm.
So River Fatal, who's hanging out in chat, wants to ask Wax how you went about capturing the feeling of pre-colonial Philippine culture within TTRPGs. Was it easy or a difficult thing to combine the two?
It's very difficult actually. There's a reason why I'm still working on Gubat Banwa. 2 years running already. Maharlika, Gio and I were able to finish Maharlika super quick. We even if I wrote Maharlika, I basically wrote Maharlika twice. I wrote it once in Tagalog and then I wrote it in English. But even then, even though I had to write 2 rule books for it, basically it still went very fast, and Gio got everything. And a big reason for it, I feel, is because Maharlika we're pulling on conventions that are kind of established. We were pulling on mecha conventions. We were pulling on Titanfall. We were pulling on Gundam Double O, right? Trans Am Max Act, shit like that. So it wasn't it wasn't too hard because we had a sort of foundation already when it comes to sort of visualizing the fiction and stuff like that. Now, when I wrote for Gubat Banwa, one thing I realized is it's very hard to help players, play the game when they don't have that fiction crystallized in them. There's a reason why PBTA games like Powered by the Apocalypse games they work very well because they emulate a kind of genre, right? Masks works great because it emulates Teen Titans, Young Justice kind of shit. Um, uh, we call that Thirsty Sword Lesbians works great because it's all the very dramatic and tender cartoon shows, right, and stuff like that. Um, for Gubat Banwa, there's not there's not a lot of things you can pull on for that, and there are some like Amaya, but that's in Tagalog, and it's not a lot of people have access to that. So it's always been hard because when we pitch the game to people, like it sounds great for them, but they have no idea how to see it in their mind's eye. So a lot of the game, a lot of Gubat Banwa's word count is to help sort of establish that. But even no matter how good I write the thing, it's still kind of hard to grok. It needs like a visual aid with it as well, and that's also something we lack. We don't have a lot of very accurate or very flattering depictions of pre-colonial Philippines. The colonization has made it so that people thought we were all savages back then with stones and obsidians and rocks and shit like that, which is very far from the truth. We're a lot closer to Indonesian, obviously, because we're right there. Indonesian, Malaysian than we are to just rocks, stones, and rocks and stuff like that. So we've had to Dill and I when we were writing the thing when I was writing the thing and Dill was working on the art for it, we've had to not just write a game but kind of set up foundations for to help set up fiction for it, right? And that's why I've had to actually write like a bunch of like of web serials and stuff like that. Like I have a web serial up right now, that's specifically to help people get the mood and the fiction of Gubat Banwa. Um, and the other half of Gubat Banwa, the martial arts half, that's a bit easier to get into. So I lean on that a lot when people play Gubat Banwa. In the same vein of like Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, Hero, House of Flying Daggers. If you can get into wuxia stuff like that, then you can definitely get into Gubat Banwa because we pull a lot from those. You just have to imagine it in a Southeast Asian perspective. So it's been very difficult, but I feel like Bill once said to me that it's very difficult writing, but it's very satisfying when people get it. Uh, and when people when they get it, like when they get it,
Yeah.
it's really great.
It
Uh,
sounds like you're having to not only like write a game, but also educate people in an entertaining way. And edutainment is so heckin' difficult.
right? Yeah, exactly. But it's satisfying because like when people get it, especially here in the Philippines, when they get it, they're like they they're opened up to it, and that's always made me glad because uh, so much of education here is focused on how good the Spanish were for bringing Catholicism here and how good the Americans were for bringing public education, even though they didn't. And that's a lot of our education here, and it's always sad because the pre-colonial times, the times when we weren't oppressed, uh, they're just as rich, if not more, than the stuff we had post-colonially. Just because we didn't write it down in in like in tablets and stuff, right? So yeah.
The victors control history, which sucks.
Yes.
Yeah.
That was great answer. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you, Riv Patel, for the question. Gio, I know they mentioned you might want to talk some more about art. Do you want to dive into any more art? Because we're just over the hour mark, so I want to, kind of start wrapping things up and give you all your evening/day. But want to make sure we hit everything you want to discuss. So please guide us to anything we've missed.
One thing I wanted to talk about, or just a little touch upon, was like AI art. I know that's something that's pretty topical. I know it's.
Yes.
Sorry, yeah, go ahead.
This is so cool. Yes, I'm sorry. You mentioned this before we got in, and then I completely forgot they mentioned it. Please go.
Yeah. So it's being used a lot. I've been like following it pretty closely because I'm a concept artist, and if I can do something a lot faster, then it's like helps a lot for me to be able to visualize something. And as well, I know I've heard that it's being used by some tabletop people, and I'm just like, what do you mean you're gonna use this this sort of mess and glob of like art, and you're gonna use it, and you're gonna say that you made this sort of thing? Is always kind of like, I feel kind of icky, like seeing sort of stuff like that. Like I know some friends are like used it, and I know like they've like also hired artists too. So I'm just like, oh, why are you using this? And then they're like, oh, I'm using it to like sort of like explain my ideas a little better. And I mean, yeah, I'm like, yeah, that totally makes sense, because especially you're commissioning people, right? You're trying to explain what you want to an artist is always pretty difficult. So I can see its uses there, and there's some pretty cool things as well with I'm a big 3D artist as well, so I've seen like AI programs being used to like sort of fix like 3D scans and like kind of fill in the gaps of certain things, because like if you tell it like, oh yeah, this is a roof and I'm missing a roof texture for this thing, then like you put in the little keywords and be like roof tiles brown whatever material, and it puts it there, and you're like, sweet, put it on, and then get on with your day. But I've seen like a lot of people being like, oh yeah, now I'm an AI artist, and I'm just like, yeah, I don't know how exactly to feel about that, and I'm just like, it's like using like a billion other people's art, and they're most likely living people's art. I've seen people use like names that I know of in the industry, and I'm just like, what are you trying to do here?
As a person who, for a long time, was responsible for like DMCA complaints and copyright complaints, and like this was my career, AI art is fascinating, and we're going to see a lot of lawsuits and a lot of debates and a lot of copyright discussions coming out of it, which is great because, chat, you can be mad at me, Disney screwed up copyright. Copyright is screwed up because of Disney. Heck, Disney.
That's true.
And yeah, I see an incredible use case for people who are like my favorite things to find on Twitter are like when artists post like, here's the reference they gave me, and then here's the thumbnail they gave me, and then here's the final art, and it's like this stick figure and turns into this amazing thing. And it's 100% true. If you can even draw a stick figure of what you want your final thing to be and just explain, that does so much to help an artist. Most artists, I'm not gonna speak for all artists, but most artists appreciate even a bad thumbnail. If you're like, this is horrible, this makes no sense, it actually helps artists a lot. A lot of people are afraid to like even do that. A lot of people are afraid to just take a post-it note and a pencil and sketch. So there's a lot of freedom in like sitting here and going, sunflower, blue sky, Sonic the Hedgehog, bleh, and then it spits out something and you're like, okay, like this. Like that is assuring, because at least they can see there is an artistic value to this that an artist can then take, But yeah, do not publish or try to sell AI art that you just plugged into a thing, because you don't want to be part of that first batch of lawsuits, because it's not going to be pretty.
Right. And I can, as a non-art person, I can talk a little bit about the the sort of shame you have in not being able to produce anything that even remotely looks like what your final product is supposed to be like. Because Kay and I have worked on maps for an upcoming source book we're working on, and I've gone, all right, Kay, and just like MS Paint, squiggly lines, and then she spits out this gorgeous, like fully detailed, and then like added in extra points of interest, and I was like, all this is so. For anyone watching, if you want to work with artists, if you have zero artistic talent like me, MS Paint is your friend, because any starting point is better than no starting point.
Yeah, sure. Definitely agree on that one.
Slight pivot back to what we were talking about before, because I don't want this to get lost. Supernova JM, Jeff from the Urgency Power podcast, says he loves those movies and he would love to see more Filipino martial arts films. Forgive me if this is mentioned already, but are there any movies you can recommend that would provide more insights into the setting, either dubbed or subbed?
Yeah, for sure. Actually, there's a bunch of movies that work great as inspiration for Gubat Banwa. If you can find a copy of Queen of Langkasuka, that's a very good movie. That's very Gubat Banwa in feel. I think in America it's called The Tsunami Warrior or something, but I'm not sure.
Legend
I
of the
think-
Tsunami Warrior.
Yeah,
Nice.
there. So that over there, but over here it's Queen of Langkasuka. There's also the second Ong Bak 2, because that's set in like a more like medieval Thailand, and it's a very good one. Ong Bak 2 and Ong Bak 3. And then a lot of the martial arts is inspired by the raid, even though that's not like pre-colonial. It's still Indonesian, and it's really really good. It uses it's a great showcase of silat, of pencak silat, which is the martial arts over there in Indonesia. So yeah, I recommend those movies in particular, because they're really great, and they have a certain aesthetic sense that's very Gubat Banwa that you can apply for Gubat Banwa games.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Chat, we're going to start our outros. If you have any other questions, chat, now is the time to throw them in. Move it or lose it. So thank you all for being here. We're going to do our outro and let us end on you. I am Kay. I have been your chaotic wholesome co-host for the evening. I got a lot going on. You can find me and what I'm doing over on Twitter at KDamnFear. It's right there right now. My streaming schedule is pinned. I'm doing a lot. I'm not going to talk about all of it tonight because we got cooler people hanging out with us today, honestly. My co-host is incredible. This is David. David, who are you? What are we doing here?
Hi, I'm David. You can find me on Twitter at FullRubberDucky, and we do the Chaotic Wholesome Talk Show, where we talk about TTRPGs, how to be a better GM, how to be a better player, in today's how to be a creator, and how to bring your dreams to life, while focusing on intersectionality and inclusion, so that everybody can have a good time.
And occasionally, non-Western, Eurocentral things and settings, which makes TTRPGs
Yes.
even cooler. So, our amazing guest here today, and chat, cops are coming for me, but chat, River Fatal says thank you. Wow, y'all are really... River Fatal says, thank you for this wonderful interview with such great creators. Rex Verde says, no questions, says thank you to everyone who made time to appear tonight. This looks like a really, really cool game. Like, chat's been lighting up, and oh, I love that movie, oh, I'm gonna go grab that. Like, this is great. So thank you both for your time. Gio, remind us again, we've already been impressed, but remind us again who you are, where we can find you, and anything you would like to plug or promote. Pretty please.
Sure. I'm Gio Manning. I do concept art and illustration. You can find me at M Squared Art on Twitter and Instagram.
It
and
shows
if
up
you search
underneath you, so.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. Sweet. Yeah, you'll find me there. And yeah, also, if you haven't, please read Iron Widow and/or listen to the audiobook. Iron Widow. I did artwork for that. I got to make the mech, one of the mechs, the Vermilion Bird, and all those other ones. Great mecha / wuxia book. I love it. definitely read that. Also, please support Into the Motherlands when it does come out. People there doing great work, and passed off a Wax.
Yeah, so yeah, hi, I'm Wax. You can find me on Twitter as Makapatag. If yeah, you can find me anywhere as Makapatag. If you can, you should read Princess Murders the Hero. It's a good web serial set in mythic Southeast, with fantasy mythic Southeast Asia. It's called Princess Murders the Hero because I want to murder the hero's journey. Also, if you have what do you call this? If you have the time, I think there's still some days in Tales of Sinauna, if you've ever heard of it. It's a pre-colonial Philippine 5e supplement that I'm also writing, that I'm also working on, um, and it's great. It's great, people. So you should check it out if you can. Thank you. So
Amazing. Thank
Thanks
you both.
again for having us on.
Thank you so
Yeah.
much for taking the time and talking with us. So much cool stuff we've gotten to talk about. Thank you, chat, for all your questions and all your enthusiasm. We do this because people care and people are excited, and it is my honor to get to be able to talk to incredible creators who are inspiring and exciting and doing things I couldn't think about doing. So thank you, everyone. We will be back next Tuesday for another episode. If you have any topics you would like us to cover or any guests you would like to have on, please ping us on Twitter. And thank you both again. Thank you, David. Thank you, chat. And we will see you next time. Bye, y'all.
Thank you. Bye.
thank you all.